You ever scroll through, hundreds of contacts on your phone and still feel totally, completely alone? It's a weird paradox of our modern world, isn't it? We're more connected than ever, but our relationships, they can feel kind of hollow. Super convenient, for sure, but maybe not so deep. So today we're going to dig into why that is, and we'll be using the incredible insights of Yasser Al-Juzaimi to guide us.
So, Al-Juzaimi kicks things off with a rule that's, well, pretty blunt, but it's absolutely essential. He says, all relationships are driven by need. Now, I know what you might be thinking. That sounds a little cold, right? Kind of transactional, maybe even cynical. But trust me, stick with this idea, because it is the absolute key to unlocking why our relationships feel so different these days.
And check this out. Here's a story that just perfectly illustrates this point. Al-Juzaimi tells this amazing story about a 114-year-old man. He asked him a simple question, who's a good person? And the old man's answer was, wow, it was a shocker. He said, everyone nowadays is a good person, as long as everyone has money. Think about that. His whole point was that money makes us independent. We don't need to put up with each other to get by anymore. You don't need your neighbor to look after your house when you're away. You can just hire a service. This isn't just a small change, it's a massive shift in how our entire society is built.
So, all this independence, it leads us straight into this big paradox of modern life. Our relationships have gotten really comfortable, but they don't always feel safe. So let's unpack what that really means.
I mean, just think about it. All this financial and tech independence, it's basically dissolved the glue, that mutual need that used to hold us together. And at first glance, that sounds great, right? Super freeing. We can just bounce from any relationship that gets a little inconvenient, but there's a catch, a big one. Who's actually there for you when things get really bad? In a real crisis, one that you can't just throw money at to fix?
Okay, so if that external glue is gone, what's left? Where do we get our stability from? Well, this is where Al-Juzaimi says we have to turn inward. Because it turns out the foundation for every single healthy relationship you have with other people is the one you have with yourself.
And to really get a handle on that relationship with yourself, there's this fascinating idea from the philosopher William James. He said that any time two people meet, it's not really two people in the room. It's six. Yeah, six. There's you as you see yourself, you as the other person sees you, and you as you actually are. And of course, the same three versions exist for the other person. All of a sudden, a simple hello gets a whole lot more complicated, doesn't it?
And that's where all this complexity can cause some real problems. See, the bigger the gap between the person you really are and the person you're pretending to be, the more you're going to feel that internal struggle. Al-Juzaimi says that this is the breeding ground for feelings of shame and unworthiness. And what do we do with those feelings? We end up projecting them all over our other relationships.
So, how do we fix this? How do we build that healthy relationship with ourselves? Well, it all starts with getting real, being honest with yourself. And that means understanding the massive difference between two words, confidence and arrogance. Confidence, that's believing in something you can actually do. It's based on reality, on experience. But arrogance, that's believing in an ability you just don't have. It's based on ignorance. See, real self-worth isn't about faking it. It's about truly knowing who you are, warts and all.
Now, beyond just working on ourselves, Al-Juzaimi brings in a second crucial pillar, what he calls the spiritual anchor. He makes the case that this kind of connection is what gives us a source of unconditional virtue, something that can totally elevate how we interact with each other. So, how does that actually work? Well, the idea is that a spiritual bond acts like a moral compass. It completely changes your motivation. You stop thinking what's in it for me and start operating from a place of higher purpose. Suddenly, when you feel like you're accountable to something bigger than just the person in front of you, things like real patience and even unconditional forgiveness, they actually become possible. Your actions aren't just part of a tit-for-tat game anymore.
All right, let's zoom out for a second. We've been talking about all the internal stuff, but what about the world around us? Al-Juzaimi has this amazing metaphor for modern life. He says it's like we're all on a fast train, and let me tell you, that train is creating some huge challenges for our relationships.
And this quote just nails it. Our lives are this train. We must double-check our destination. The point is, life is moving so fast that it pushes us to just act. We don't think, we just follow the herd, follow the latest trend. We're hurtling down the tracks so fast we don't even know where we're headed or why we got on this train in the first place. And here's the kicker. If you experience something without being aware, did you even really experience it at all?
So Al-Juzaimi basically boils this whole modern pressure cooker down into a simple three-step chain reaction.
First, you get individualism. Everyone's on their own island, right? Well, that naturally leads to step 2, dehumanization. We start seeing other people less as human beings and more like, well, objects, or just numbers on a screen. And the final destination of this whole process, something he calls contractualism.
So what on earth is contractualism? It's basically when a relationship becomes a rigid contract, a transaction. You know, I do this for you, you do that for me. End of story. Technically, it's fair, it's just, but it's totally missing the stuff that actually makes a relationship feel human. You know, kindness, a little grace, forgiveness.
And there's this really powerful line from the Quran that just hits this point home. And do not forget kindness among yourselves. It's so simple, but it's exactly what gets lost. When every interaction is just a deal, we forget the most important part of being human, being kind to each other.
Okay, I know, this is all starting to sound pretty bleak, but here's the good news. The point isn't to just throw our hands up in despair. It's actually about empowerment. Look, we can't exactly jump off this speeding train of modern life, but we can choose to become aware, conscious passengers. We can choose humanity over the contract.
And the power to do that, it starts with one simple but honestly life-changing idea. You have to separate what you do from what is done to you. Your actions, your responses, you control those. The stuff that happens to you, not so much. All your real power, your real agency, lies in focusing on your side of the street.
So what does that look like in the real world? Well, think of it like a ladder, a hierarchy of good manners. The bottom rung, the default setting, is just reciprocation. You're good to me, I'm good to you. You're a jerk to me, I'm a jerk to you. But we can choose to climb. The next rung up is the kind manner. I'm going to be good to you even if you're not. Then there's the better manner. I'm going to treat you the way I believe God wants me to. And at the very top, the absolute best, I'm going to treat you the way I hope God will treat me. Now that is a total game changer of a perspective.
And really, it all comes down to this one crucial point. Between what someone does and how you react, there's a little gap, a space. And in that tiny little space, that's where all your power lies. That's your chance to choose. You can actually stop the whole cycle of negativity right in its tracks by choosing to respond with intention instead of just reacting blindly on impulse. That choice, it's always yours to make.
And that brings us right to the final question we have to ask ourselves. We're living in a world that is programmed to default to contracts, to efficiency, to cold, hard justice, a world that sees people as numbers. So in every single interaction you have today, the choice is yours. Are you going to choose that cold justice? Or are you going to choose conscious, deliberate kindness?